Hey y'all, it's Sophie Line. I have the awesome Rob Cogan with me here at the NACC, and we have something really special to show you about what they've been working on this week.
So today I'm going to go over the T28 Super Heavy tank. I think of all the tanks we have in the collection, none have this almost mystique about them, just this overall fan club for it. Probably best I compare it to would be the British Tank Museum's TOG. Just people like the fat, flat tank that it is.
Yep.
We're going to go over a little bit about the history of the tank, and I'm going to talk about some of the challenges we're going to face as we move it. I'm really looking forward to this. All right, so first let's discuss a little bit about the history of the T28. And the first thing you need to know is this was designed not to really fight other tanks. This was designed initially as an assault tank. And an assault tank is a tank specifically designed to fight against fortified enemy positions, to lead in an attack. So first thing with any good assault tank is it's going to be very heavy. Heavily armor plated, it's going to have a powerful engine to move that armor plane, but it's not going to go very fast, and usually it's going to have a good, high explosive, capable gun. In the case of T28, it's designed around this 105mm T5E1 gun. Most powerful gun really put on a tank during the war. Of course, we had 90mm on the Pershing. This is a little bit more powerful, but this is designed to knock out reinforced concrete emplacements. Behind it, you have a foot of steel, 12 inches of solid steel, both on the maillet and then the tank itself. So this tank was designed to take direct hits and keep on going. And you might ask, well, what exactly was this designed for? And this tank was very specific. Other assault tanks like the Sherman Jumbo, the T14 assault tank, they were more general purpose advanced assault tanks. T28 was specifically designed to attack this Siegfried line. Early on in World War II, we had this great fear that we were going to get through France, we were going to hit the Siegfried line, and we would essentially be bogged down trying to break through. If you're not familiar with the Siegfried line, it was the main German line of defenses on the German border. And their whole idea was that if for some reason we pushed them through France and Belgium, no matter what, they could hold us at the Siegfried line. What ended up happening is we actually were able to get through the Siegfried line just using good old combined arms tactics, air supremacy, engineering assets. Everything we had, we used, everything that was in our toolkit we used, and we were able to break through the Siegfried line. But this was initially conceptualized to be that lead assault, to be that spearhead into the Siegfried line, take all the rounds that the fortifications of the Siegfried line could throw at it, and burst its way through, knocking out gun emplacements and anything else that might get in the way. By the time, though, the T28 is finally prepared, and two of them are produced, the Siegfried line, we've already gone through it. And so for a little bit, the project looks like it's going to stagnate, but they keep it alive because then we think, well, we can use it once we go into the mainland invasion of Japan, because we also believe we're going to be up against heavy fortifications. Thankfully, that was not the case. We didn't have to invade mainland Japan. And the T28 program essentially was canceled. No more were built except those two. And the T28 then spent the rest of its days really just as a test bed for moving heavy tanks. They actually learned a lot about how to recover, tow, and transport heavy vehicles based off this tank, because total combined weight of this vehicle is 90 tons. Later on in life, it was then given to MIRTC. You might have heard that term before, MIRTC camouflage, used in the 1980s. MIRTC means Mobility Equipment Research and Development Command, and they essentially got the T28 to use as a test weight for transportation operations. That was at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, and so there's this whole legend of how the T28 went missing for decades and was found in Fort Belvoir. Well, that's why it was there. It was actually used essentially as a test weight for testing out vehicle recovery, transportation methods, eventually tossed out of training area because it wasn't used anymore. But by the mid-1970s, we get to a point where there's suddenly renewed interest in World War II armor. There really wasn't a lot of interest in really capturing some of these one-off prototypes. But as we go into the 70s, the war is now starting to fade into memory. The veterans aren't always around to tell their stories. We get this renewed interest in rare vehicles just like this. And so when they find the T28, there's a story that Hunter reports it, that he's found this weird tank. People go, wait, that sounds like the T28. We forgot that it was out there. And so with renewed interest, people go out, they recover the T28, and then shortly after, T28 is sent to Fort Knox, where it ends up with the Patton Museum of Cavalry and Armor, our former, you could say, past life as a collection before we moved down here to Fort Benning. And it was there as an outdoor monument piece ever since. It's now with us. Came down here with us at the beginning of the decade in 2010, and then just outside our workshop until we could get around to it. And finally, A couple years ago, we had the chance to send her over here to the Fort Benning Logistics Readiness Center to get repainted, fixed up. And some of you may know that we unfortunately had kind of a catastrophe hit. On the way over here to the Logistics Readiness Center, the het she was on, the heavy equipment trailer, on just a very particularly bad stretch of road, had its brakes go out. Thankfully, no one was hurt, but the T28 ripped itself free of the chains on the vehicle, which actually was a good thing because it didn't try to take the truck with it, and landed in a ditch. Amazingly, only minor damage occurred to this tank. I mean, she is built like a rock, and she came here to the Logistics Readiness Center. We got her track all painted up, fixed up. The little bit of damage she had minor damage to her bogey stations on the back end where she hit the ditch. That's all been repaired, so she's good to go. The inside crew compartment has actually also been blasted and repainted. So I'm hoping next week, actually, when Sophie comes back for the move, we're going to actually get inside the vehicle and actually show you around about what it would have been like to actually fight inside of a T28. And I'm just excited to get her inside for the first time in her entire existence. This tank will be housed indoors in a climate-controlled facility. So this is, in my opinion, a very big win for this collection because we're taking really big steps to protect vehicles like this. So one of the challenges we have with moving this tank, of course being 90 tons total, is the fact that it was designed to actually break down to 3 different parts. Here behind me I have the main hull, which weighs, with ammunition, fuel on board, would be 60 tons. Of course, that's the main part of the vehicle. You notice, of course, it has standard HVSS track, or horizontal volute spring suspension track, very similar to the late war Sherman tanks. But you'll notice here at the final drive, you can see it has this interesting interface to connect to the outer set of track. And the outer set of track is very important because of the vehicle's weight. The outer set of track actually holds 70% of the vehicle's weight, allowing it to traverse over softer ground. So while it does add a lot of weight to the vehicle, it actually makes it more mobile over softer ground, which it would have needed if it would have gone to combat. That presents a lot of unique challenges trying to assemble essentially 3 parts of a tank into one. It's not easy. This hasn't been done probably since the vehicle left Fort Belvoir in the late 1970s. So we're looking at a process that hasn't been done in at least 40 years. It was taken apart 10 years ago, but the process is a little different. And speaking of that process, one of the unwritten rules in Army maintenance is when you go to work on something, rule number 1, open up the manual. Don't try to fake it. Don't just try to figure it out on your own, because there's a reason why we write the manuals. So in our case, there is no actual technical manual for the T28, but we're very lucky in that we actually have a copy of the original Ordnance technical notes. So this would have been written essentially by the Ordnance Corps while they're testing the T28, and this actually has everything you need to operate this vehicle. It's just not as refined as a technical manual. I would tell you that there are parts, it's essentially a rough draft, where it will tell you to reference one paragraph or one image, and the numbering doesn't match up, and so you have to turn a couple pages, and then you find, okay, so obviously originally this was here, and then they added a paragraph and kind of shifted things around. But this has everything we need to reassemble the vehicle. And it's very interesting because we originally were thinking of different ways using modern equipment we could reinstall the tracks on this vehicle. What we find is that the process from 1946 is probably the only one that will work. And so by sticking with that original process that they developed at Aberdeen Proving Grounds, we'll be able to get this vehicle reassembled. So here I am standing with the outer track units of the T28. Each one weighs 15 tons, and like I said, when combined with the vehicle, they carry 70% of the vehicle's weight. Interesting thing we found out is that because these carry 70% of the weight, that standing here by themselves, they are actually taller than the vehicle because the suspension system's actually extended upward due to the fact that it's not carrying all the weight. So one of the challenges we learned going through the manual is that we have to actually lock up the suspension, essentially shorten these down so we can actually put them up against the hull. That requires a lot of specialized tools that honestly aren't in normal Army inventory, even for World War II. That was all custom-built tools. Luckily for us, the vehicle had its own toolboxes on board. If you can actually see here, the back of the hull, or the track sections, this is 1-inch steel plate armor, but if I had a crowbar here, I could just fit in here. These actually slide out about 6 feet and actually hold all the tools. So all the tools for the vehicle were actually carried on board. Everything you would have needed to disconnect and connect this vehicle was on the vehicle. It would have required no recovery services from another unit from another vehicle. It was supposed to be done by the crew, by themselves, which would have been very difficult in the field. But again, this vehicle is not designed for a long campaign. It was designed to get to the Siegfried line, get through the Siegfried line, and that was probably it. It was probably just a one fire and forget kind of weapon. So coming back here through the track system, which we'll be working with, anytime you get two track sections together, well, you don't, because there's no other tank that does that. We're going to have to do that, and it goes in very, very, very specifically with each other. So the first thing we'll do is you'll notice that this looks like a standard Sherman, like I said, late war Sherman horizontal volute spring system. So you have your two volute springs, and they counteract each other, and that gives you your suspension. What we'll have to do when we take this tank over to our new place before we reassemble it is that we'll first use wood blocks. We'll actually back the tracks over the wood blocks so the road wheels float into the air. And then the tank actually came with these steel loops of various sizes. And these loops will actually hook in on the inside. I'm not sure you can see that on the camera, but they'll hook in here and they'll hook in here. And that will actually keep this road wheel floated up. And we'll do that for every single road wheel. We'll lock up into place. And then once we do that, we'll take the wood blocks out. And then what we have to do is make sure the track is secure, because with the suspension lifted up, if we try to lift this hull, the suspension is going to hang down low, and that's going to create issues trying to fit it. We don't want the track just dragging around. So we have special turnbuckles, what they call suspension assemblies in the manual. It'll connect up here underneath the tie bolt shaft, and then it'll connect down here to the center guides of the track. If you look here, the center guides have holes, which is very unique in World War II to this vehicle. You don't see it with Shermans. So we'll actually go into the center guide teeth, and that'll keep the track, once we tighten it, that'll keep the track up against the road wheels. And that'll shorten this down by several inches. Once we have that done, we'll then bring the T28 up against, because this is actually the left side of the track. It's the out, right now inside's out, the way they're assembled. All right, as we bring them together, we're going to take out the tie bolts. These are big, 3-foot long bolts. These will come out. We'll bring the T28 forward, and then the first thing we'll do is we'll line up these anchor points you see at the top of the vehicle. There's 6 of these. The first thing we have to do is get the rear one and then number 2 together. Once those are put in together, we can start putting in the tie bolts into these slots here. And these are actually made so they'll line up perfectly with each other. Right now we got an M1 Abrams actually doing a road test, so sorry about that. So we'll line those up, we'll get the tie bolts in, we'll put the rest of the anchor points in, and then the vehicle's actually designed, once you have the anchor points and the tie bolts in, you actually just kind of rock the vehicle back and forth. In this case, we'll use our tug because we actually don't have the engine in the vehicle right now. We'll rock it back and forth, get everything lined up, and then we will connect the final drives. So I already showed you over there the final drive, how it's stuck out. That'll fit into here. We have the special tools needed then to reconnect the final drive. There's actually a fairly large rear tie bolt there. The reconnect will get a clock so they actually sync together, and then the vehicle will be able to be towed, and then we'll have to go ahead and do the other one. Now, normally you would do all that, the lifting and the actual bringing it towards the T28. You would do that with the vehicle's own winch systems. If you, we'll show some images where you can actually see the winches are on board the tank. Because of the age, because of the elements, we're not going to do that. We're going to be using the M88A2 Hercules armored recovery vehicle. I know one of Sophie's favorite. And we will actually be, that will be the one modern cheating convenience we will use in this process, try to help us bring the house together. Once that's connected, we'll have a 90-ton behemoth ready to go into the building, and that's going to be its own process. That we'll show later. So if you like what you see, if you want to know more what we're doing at the U.S. Army Armor and Cavalry Collection, please subscribe, one, to Sophie's channel, because she keeps everything, she keeps putting out in public what we do. Follow us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and we love sharing what we do because it's important to us to share the U.S. Army's armor history. We think it's very important, and we're just so happy to be able to preserve and conserve this beautiful tank collection, and we just look forward to being able to sharing more in the future. And speaking of the future, I think right behind me I have an M1 Abrams coming down the road on a road test.